I was driving to my parents' house across the state. I hadn't seen them in over a year, so I wanted to get there as quickly as possible. I wasn't planning to stop for anything except gas, but by about 2 in the afternoon, I was starving. I needed to stop and get a quick bite. I pulled into a KFC in the middle of nowhere and parked. I probably should have gone through the drive-thru, but I'd promised my girlfriend that I wouldn't eat in her car, so I had to go inside. The place was weirdly empty, except for an older woman at the front counter. She smiled at me, looking like she hadn't seen a customer in hours. She seemed like a sweet, harmless old lady, very Midwestern. I said hello and ordered a Pepsi and some chicken nuggets. "Back in a sec," she said after she took my money. I guess she was the only one working because she disappeared into the back. I sat for a couple minutes in one of the booths, looking out of the rolling cornfields on the other side of the highway. Storm clouds had just rolled in, and I hoped that I wouldn't have to drive through the rain. Then, someone pulled off the highway and parked in front of the restaurant. At first, I thought it was just a black car, but I quickly realized that it wasn't a car at all. It was a limo. I couldn't believe that an actual limo was driving on the highway, let alone that it decided to park outside a roadside KFC. I watched as a woman in a beautiful wedding dress got out of the driver's seat and walked right into the restaurant. I know I shouldn't have been staring, but it was such a strange image. She looked at me, both because I was the only other person there and because I was staring at her. I could see that she was beautiful, but her face was smeared with mascara. Obviously, she had been crying. She smiled at me and walked straight over. "Can I join you?" she asked. Sure," I said. So many questions were running through my head, but I didn't know what to say without accidentally insulting her. Clearly, she had been through a lot. Had she just been left at the altar? That seemed like the most likely explanation. "I'm Tom," I said. She shook my hand. "Mandy." We sat for a few seconds in awkward silence until she asked me, "Am I hideous?" No," I said. She wasn't hideous at all. Despite the smeared makeup and her messy hair, she was genuinely beautiful. "You look great. Are you attracted to me?" she asked. I was sipping on my Pepsi at the time, and her question made me choke. I started. "Because James said he was attracted to me," she continued. "But that was a lie." So she had been left at the altar. Poor thing, I thought. "You're a very attractive woman," I said. And it wasn't a lie. She definitely was. But I was in a committed relationship. I wasn't going to tell her that I was attracted to her, even though that was probably the answer she wanted to hear. "You're so sweet," she said. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. She was wearing long white gloves, and for the first time, I noticed that they were speckled with red stains. Was that blood? I tried to pull away, but she squeezed my hand hard. "Let's run away together, Tom," she said. "Just you and me." My heart started to race. I yanked my hand out of her grip and stood up. Thank you, but I really need to be going. I don't want to be driving in this storm." At the exact moment, the worker came out of nowhere and placed a tray of chicken nuggets in front of me. She looked at the bride. "Well, don't you look pretty?" the lady said. "Thank you, but my friend Tom and I were in the middle of a conversation. Please leave." The old lady forced a smile, the kind that most Midwesterns have when they get offended but don't want to say anything. Then she hurried back into the kitchen. I started inching towards the door. She jumped out of her chair. "You're leaving me too?" she screamed. "No," I said. I just need to get to my car. I think I left my hand sanitizer. Let me walk with you, she said. She started following me. I tried to act as casually as possible, even holding the door open for her. But I knew she was deranged. As soon as I get to my car, I'd lock the door and drive off. But she grabbed my shoulder and held me in place. Then she looped her arm around mine, like we were walking down the aisle. I'm sure she could feel me trembling. As we passed the limo, I noticed that its front fender was caved in and smeared with blood. This psycho had run someone over. I quickly turned away, but she knew that I had noticed. That was our best man, she explained. That's what was left of him anyway. I caught him kissing James behind the church. She stopped walking. She wanted me to say something. I'm sure he deserved it, I mumbled. He did, and James is in the back. Would you like to see him? She wouldn't let me go. She stared at me, eyes wide open. She didn't blink. I don't think she blinked once since I met her. What could I say? She'd basically confessed to having a dead body in the back of her limo. This woman was a psychopath, and if I said the wrong thing, she'd attack me too. She was slender, not to mention weighed down by her ornate dress, but I knew she'd been able to overpower me. There was a real rage inside of her. Let's not talk about James, I said. You deserve better than him. That made her smile. Wait here, and I'll get my hand sanitizer. I gently pushed her away and walked as casually as I could to my car. I unlocked the door and slid inside. I tried to close it behind me, but she grabbed the door and held it open. I shoved the key towards the ignition, but the woman punched me in the face. My keys went flying. You're going to leave me too? She said. You're a liar, just like James. She dove through the door, her hair flinging wildly around her face. I'd never seen so much anger in my life. She grabbed me by the throat, but before I could do anything to fight back, I heard a loud bang. Then, the bride froze. Her expression shifted from anger to shock. And before I could figure out what happened, I saw a puddle of red pool in her stomach, soaking into the white wedding dress. As soon as she crumpled to the ground, I could see the old lady standing right behind her. She was holding a shotgun. Thanks, I said. That old lady smiled that same Midwestern smile. Get back inside, hun, she said. We need to call the police. And you never got to eat your chicken nuggets. I won't tell you my name, but I'm a moderately famous Instagram personality with a lot of followers. I post a lot of stuff about body positivity and veganism. I like to think that my Insta is a force for good in the world, and I believe so many people follow me because I treat my fans with respect at all times. My personal philosophy is that life is short, and we have to make as many connections as possible. I get a lot of messages from people who want to thank me for brightening up their day, and I try to respond to as many of them as I can. Last week, I received an interesting question from a follower named Natalie. I didn't recognize her name or photo. She wrote a one-sentence message. Did you go to River Hills High School? I was shocked by the question. Yes, that was the school I went to, but it wasn't something I wanted my fans to know. I was open about everything in my life, but I never shared anything about my family or my past. I figured that this Natalie person must have been a former classmate, but her photo didn't look familiar at all. I didn't remember any Natalies from my childhood. Maybe she was a friend of a friend or something. I tried to be diplomatic in my answer without giving too much away. I wrote, "Thank you for the question, but I don't share my school information on Insta. Have a blessed day." She responded instantly with the most hateful thing I'd ever read. "I know who you are, bitch. You made my high school experience miserable, and I hope you die. Blessed day, my ass." It was extremely uncalled for. Anyone who knew my brand knew that I would never purposely hurt anyone. It wasn't in my nature. So I responded, "Have we met?" She didn't respond for the whole day. I posted my usual inspirational quotes and affirmations, and my followers responded as always, but I couldn't stop thinking about this Natalie person. Who was she? How did she know me? Then, exactly 24 hours after my last message, she sent me a single photo. It was a picture of the outside of my house. My blood ran cold. She knew where I lived. "What do you want?" I asked her. Again, she didn't answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about Natalie. I knew that my house had really good security. All the windows and doors were locked, and my alarm was set. There was no way she'd be able to sneak in. But still, that didn't calm my nerves. By about 2 in the morning, I was finally able to drift off to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, my Insta was flooded with comments. I didn't know why. So I opened my account and saw that I'd somehow posted a photo of myself during the night. It was a picture of me sleeping on my bed, taken from my own phone. It had one word as a caption: nightmare. I felt like throwing up. That woman had somehow snuck into my house and taken a photo of me while I was sleeping. And of course, I called the police. They came and checked all the rooms, but there was no sign that anyone had snuck in. Nothing at all. I was scared that she'd come back, but I was also worried about my Insta. The sleeping photo of me was not flattering. I had zit cream all over my face and drool hanging out of my mouth. I looked awful, and the comments were not kind. I messaged Natalie and asked her what she did. Her response was, "I wanted to show the world what you were really like. You're ugly on the outside and the inside." "Who are you?" I demanded. "You really don't remember me, do you?" she replied. I tried really hard to think of anyone from high school that would hate me so much as this woman did. I couldn't think of a single person. I was always so nice. Even though I was a cheerleader and a prom queen, and really pretty, I managed to show everyone that I didn't feel superior because of my natural beauty. I was still a good person. I still am. "I don't know you," I wrote. "Please leave me alone." "Gladly," she wrote. "My job is done. Now everyone can see how ugly you are, and there's nothing you can do to change that." She seemed really proud of herself, just because she'd taken an unflattering photo of me when I wasn't awake. I knew I should have been scared about someone trespassing on my property, but mostly I was just angry. I needed to think of a way to mitigate the damage that had already been done to my brand. I figured the best thing to do was to post a video of me taking ownership of the way I looked. So I positioned my camera in the bathroom and hit record. I told my followers that I wanted them to see the real me, and that everyone could look beautiful if they tried hard enough. Then I started a little makeup tutorial. I narrated everything into the camera and transformed my face from blotchy and tired looking into a vision of beauty that I always tried to be. It seemed to work out great, but I ended with a final message. "See how easy that was? Now you can try." I posted the video, happy that I'd taken lemons and made some lemonade. But slowly, I realized that my face was getting hot. My cheeks itched, and tears were starting to well up in my eyes. Something felt very wrong. I opened my Insta and saw that, as usual, people were lavishing my video with all sorts of compliments. In my direct messages, though, I noticed something from Natalie. "This is the last time you will ever be pretty." Then, my face felt like it was on fire. I could barely breathe. I looked at myself in the mirror, and even though my vision was getting blurry, I could see that my skin was turning red and swollen. That's when I knew what Natalie had done. When she snuck in, she didn't just take a photo of me sleeping. She tampered with my makeup. She filled it with God knows what. I called an ambulance and was taken straight to the hospital. It's been 3 days since the doctors treated me. They did their best, but it just wasn't enough. They said I'll have permanent scarring from all the chemical burns, not to mention complete lack of vision in my left eye. I'm completely mangled now, and my Instagram is filled with fans asking me what happened. I'm too afraid to answer them. I don't know what to say, and I know I can't show them what I look like now. The police are trying to track down Natalie, but I haven't heard anything yet. It's like she never existed. And maybe that's the worst part. I still don't remember her. She ruined my life, mangled me, and I still have no idea who she is.
The dreariness after long hours of rainfall dragged. It was all-encompassing, filling my gaze with a bleak aspect of the world. The pattering drops striking the glass pane outside of the restaurant and the empty streets outside of it. KFC was empty, and in some way I felt I was too, deep in my heart. I was lost in the maze of thoughts, things that had been long forgotten, and I succumbed to painful pangs of yearning for memories long past. The groove of the beating rain on the pane of glass lulled me to drowsiness. I tried to remain alert to the door as I sat behind the counter watching this desolate vision of rain come all around me. A door creaked behind me, and I turned my neck in futile relief, half expecting Josh to walk through, but there was no one there. He had been gone for 15 minutes at most, and I suppose he took his time with whatever he was doing back there. I picked my finger from my fist and rubbed around the counter table. I paused in my track of thought, and I wondered to myself why he always took so long. "Josh?" I called out, echoing through the defeating quietness in the cafe. There was no response. Boys, I thought to myself as I settled into my seat. It was cold, and it was not difficult to imagine he had surrendered to some sinful machinations back there, with no one around for us to serve. A discerning smirk crossed my face, and I rolled back into the quietness that was my mind. It was in this quietness in which I was sitting when I saw a black sedan cruising through the pool of water in the lot. I gasped in delight at the sight of a new customer, but a curious maneuver followed, because the driver changed his mind from parking at the allotted space. He instead drove all the way up to the doorway of our KFC. I contained my apprehensiveness with a little understanding because of the rainfall. Still, I could not make sense of it. I stood from the seat behind the counter and ambled around to the main foyer. The driver pulled to a stop outside and turned off the engine. I sensed something was awry, but I was so given to duty that I did not dwell too much on the thought. Just as I approached the door, a redhead girl stepped out of the passenger seat. And for one who was in a car, she was as drenched as though she had been in the rain. She wore no makeup, but her skin was so flawless that it seemed so. Upon sighting me, she looked down with her eyes fixed. I was struck by it. The driver's seat yawned open. "Stupid bitch!" A burly black man introduced himself with those words as he stepped out of the driver's seat of the car. The alarms immediately went off in my head, and perhaps he perceived it too, because when his eyes turned to me, his expression changed. His features slackened, and suddenly he squinted. I cleared my throat with a loud cough. "You can't bring your vehicle to the door, sir," I said to him. reining on the urge to not stare at the girl. "What?" he blurted in exasperation. The words hung at the base of my throat. The rain drew over his face as it cast into a long, vicious smile. Everything else that mattered blurred in that moment as I saw this man, whose name I did not know, whom I had just met barely a moment ago, draw out the longest blade I had ever seen. I'm sorry," I apologized without thinking. "I'm gonna kill you," he said, casually and with no arrogance attached to it. It was the seriousness of his words and the decisiveness with which he said it that scared me to the core of my being. It was the same way a man who had jogged many times down a trail would say to himself that he would jog. He slammed the door, and my eyes fell to his blade and the way he gripped it. He was a man who had done it many times. I could tell, and it made me sick with dread that such a promise was made to me. The rain sluiced through the shiny edge of the blade, and it was not difficult to imagine my blood on it. The bitter taste of panic filled my mouth, and my knees rocked. "But first, you're going to make us something to eat," he said, as composed as he'd made his first promise. He beckoned to the redhead, and she staggered towards him. He grabbed her hair forcefully and held it up. He placed his blade between the tuft, and he slashed. The blade made a clean shave through the band of her hair. He snickered and threw it on the floor. I trembled as I turned back into the restaurant and saw it deepen in emptiness before me. I wondered how my life had moved from the dullness that it was moments ago to me being on the edge of a knife. My heart was in a wild frenzy that worsened when I thought about such a strange death that had been promised to me. Josh had not yet returned, and for his sake I prayed that he did not have to. "Trying to run away, huh? Making me run in the rain?" the man said. But I sensed that it was not to me, but to the girl he was with. "I'm gonna rip you apart and spread your gut on the streets for the cops to find." The bitter spittle of panic in my mouth balled up to a clogging aqueous matter. I retched, and with only one hand in my mouth, I stopped myself from throwing up. "Be quick about it," he said, but I could not. I was so shaken by my fear of death that when I tried to grab the serving spatula, I dropped it. This made him furious. "Can you women get any stupider?" Neither of us had any answers for him. He kissed his teeth and began to make his way around the counter, sensing we were both overcome by our fear to resist him. When he was beside me, he nudged me violently with his elbow and I fell towards the door. My fall made way through the door and I saw Josh leaning against it with a Rubik's Cube in his hand. He saw me on the floor and he lost restraint. He charged at this strange man in swift silence and struck him in the back of the head with the edge of the Rubik's Cube with all of the force that he could muster. The man fell forward and struck his temple against the glass over the trays. Just then, the loud blaring of a police siren rent the air, with the man still unconscious on the floor. "Mother!" Josh cussed at the man who was unconscious on the floor with the blade by his side. Josh quickly picked it off the floor and placed it on the counter. "Are you okay?" he asked me. I could scarcely breathe, but I nodded my head, only too glad to get another chance at life. "Everybody freeze!" Two cops burst into the cafe with their guns drawn. The redhead girl scooted over to us as she burst into tears. "Hey, he's over here! I knocked him out already!" Josh said to the cops. And then he turned to us. I knew he was no good, so I'd called the cops.